exactly what Canada's 2025 National Cybersecurity Strategy recognized. So, how do we try to collaborate within this landscape? So, what we know from literature is that we have identified barriers to information sharing, such as trust deficit, legal uncertainties, technical incompatibilities. And we also know that we have government frameworks that exist to circumscribe the information sharing processes between public and private partnership. And organization recognize a need for collaboration. So however, there's like a gap, which is how do these challenges manifest directly from across different stages of cyber resilience, and what specific solutions are needed to different operational contexts? Because if we are able to see those differences, then we can develop better, efficient, and targeted solutions. So to answer this question, we are examining information sharing through 3 operational stages, and looking at the public and private partnerships. So we have incident response planning, which is a structured approach for detecting, responding, and recovering from cyber incidents. We have the business continuity plan, which is maintaining essential business functions during disruption. And we have disaster recovery plan, which is basically restoring critical IT systems and data following major disruptions. So throughout our report and this presentation, we are trying to identify how information sharing challenges manifest uniquely across these 3 stages, and we are trying to propose stage-specific approaches for addressing structural barriers. Finally, we're trying to provide insights for designing effective collaborative systems that recognize that operational differences, again, between public and private partnership. So I'm going to let my colleagues take over from here. Thank you.
Hello. To start with the cyber resilience concept, we will check that resilience is the psychological concept that is the capacity to adapt against a situation that is adverse or a disturbing agent. Now, the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity defines the cyber resilience as the ability to anticipate, withstand, recover from, and adapt to adverse conditions and compromises on systems that use or are enabled by cyber resources. Nowadays, the cybercrime has grown, and it is also that public and private sector can detect that they were compromised even months after they had an incident. So it is really important to have cyber resilience and build it, because now the cybercrime is performing destructive attacks, and this is not only to affect the confidentiality or even the availability of a system. This has huge impact on the national cybersecurity of a country. Now we have the cyber kill chain, and how does it can be used in the cyber resilient process, because it is built and adapted from the military skill chain, and it has the step approach to identify and stop the enemy attack. So with the 7 steps of the cyber kill chain process, we can know the adversary's attack on which methodologies or techniques they are using. We have also the micro attack, and it also describes the techniques, tactics, and procedures that the adversary uses to attack a critical infrastructure. And these kind of attacks have impacted the world, because it is about international and critical infrastructures, such as the transport or energy. We have 2 main attacks that have impacted the world, such as WannaCry, that was about a ransomware attack around the world in 2017, and it hits the infrastructures that from all the world. For example, it started with telecommunications in Spain, then transports, and in all the world, this attack was performed by several criminals. And then we have 4 years later, the Log4Shell vulnerability exploited, and this allowed the execution of remote code without authentication in a server. And this was mainly exploited during the war, Russian and Ukraine. And this is important that even in the cyberspace, now the battlefield of any war, it's moving to the cyberspace to attack the critical infrastructures of any country and have an impact on their national security. Well, the cyber resilience process is built by three main processes that are the incident response plan, business continuity plan, and disaster recovery plan. These three steps are triggered by an incident, but here we can see, for example, the IRP process, and the first stage is the preparation that covers the preparation and the establishment of a incident response team. So we don't have to wait until an incident happens. We need to be prepared before to be ready when an incident happens, and we can trigger our incident response plan. If this is not working so well, we need to start the business continuity plan. And if both are not working, we start the disaster recovery plan. And we need to share information during any of these stages to, for example, public sectors and private sectors. For example, in the incident response plan, we can share information about the IOCs, the name of the malware that is triggering us, also the technique, tactics, and procedures, and the hash, for example, of the files that are being downloaded or executed. And then we may ask to the service provider, the internet service provider, to block an IP address, for example. During a BCP and a DRP, the organization can share information about how they can maintain the critical process to other ones in the same sector, or lessons learned and also they can share information to the police, for example, in cases where a cybercrime is performed. All the above, we need to perform and respect the confidentiality or NDA, so the information can be general or even without sensitive information. Well, now we'll speak about the incident response plan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Shanza, and I will be going through incident response plan, and I'll be referring it as IRP. So what is an IRP? It's a structured, organized, position-wide process that helps organizations have a protocol for detecting, containing, and recovering their information in cases of incidents, cyber incidents, or any other incidents. So what happens is that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It is customized to fit each organization's scope. Canadian IRP frameworks and ecosystems that exist are as follows. I'm talking about a few important ones, even though there are tons of them. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about FCIRP by the Public Safety Canada, which is the Federal Cyber Incident Response Plan. So it coordinates national level response for cyber incidents in non-government systems by defining roles, escalation tiers, and communication protocols. It also integrates with broader emergency plans like FIRB and CSIM to ensure unified action. There are some others like the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity and also Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange. All of these together are working towards the same goal, which is having a better cyber secure Canada. So the key purpose is to align public-private response efforts, enable faster coordinated containment and recovery, and build a safer Canada. So what is IRP? IRP can be done in two phases. One is before an incident, which is the left of boom, that refers to preparing critical services and having early detection to stop attacks. And the second one is after an incident, to share what happened so that other organizations or companies can follow and avoid the same sort of attacks. I'm going to be talking about the Desjardins data breach in 2019, which affected 10 million people. And particularly, what I want to highlight is a weak IRP within the organization that led to such a huge loss. The three key points that I want to talk about are a delayed disclosure to authorities by the Desjardins organization, which showed that the IRP lacked clearer timelines, a late mitigation, which again indicates weak early threat detection, and regulatory gaps. The IRP did not meet legal or data protection standards. The FCIRP, and I'm focusing more on the FCIRP because currently this is one of Canada's most popular incident response plan. I want to talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of the FCIRP, which is a clear governance, integrated existing plans, and after action reviews. But some of the weaknesses of this IRP by Public Safety Canada is that there are some legal ambiguities, there are operational technology limitations, there's a low private sector inclusion, and it's more of a general protocol. It's not specific or customized to each sort of organization. So how can we measure the effectiveness of an IRP? Here are some technical metrics and some operational metrics through which we can measure the effectiveness of an IRP within an organization. And I want to quote the Forbes Technology Council 2025 article, which says that cyber resilience is not bought, it's built. And measuring maturity across systems, processes, and teams identifies weak links before attackers can take advantage of it. FCIRP and other frameworks like the Emergency Strategy Protocol offer coordination, but they lack in a lot of areas. And to propose a solution for that, my colleagues will be following with a lot of recommendations as what can be done so that these problems can be catered to. Thank you.
I'll be covering the business continuity plan. So our business continuity plan basically makes sure that we're able to continue operation during an incident. So in our business continuity plans, we have things such as an impact assessment, communication plan, and other aspects that basically make sure that we can continue to be functional throughout an incident. There's some relationships that we have currently through the private-to-private sector and the public-to-private sector that allows for information sharing. So in the private-to-private sector, we have peer-to-peer sharing. So these are relationships that we built throughout time. These will often be companies who are in the same industry working together through shared interests and working together because they know each other. They're able to build trust over the years. We have the ISACs, Information Sharing and Analysis Centers. These are nonprofit organizations that kind of facilitate information sharing within a sector. They're known to be in different sectors. So we have one in aviation, the automotive sector, and we also have one in financial services. The one in the financial services has been known to promote collaboration and been really helpful for sharing IOCs, indicators of compromise, and helping to share information securely. And then we also have cross-sector platforms. So these are basically for working within the same industry, working within different industries within the same private sector. And here they also facilitate information sharing. A common one is the Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange, and they help Canadian businesses share information securely. Benefits of this type of vertical collaboration is that we can have a shared level of resilience. We can also make sure that everyone has the help that they need, and then also make sure our business continuity plans are realistic because we're learning from each other as we go along. We also have a lot about public to private sharing. This is very encouraged currently. We have a lot of collaboration with the government. The government has access to a lot of intelligence that allows us to paint a bigger picture that we wouldn't be able to paint with just a small piece of information. And there's also a lot of collaboration with critical infrastructures. These are systems that help us to be operational throughout the day-to-day doings. So it's important to know how they plan to react to incidents. So for this, I talked about a case study with the Colonial Pipeline. So this happened in 2021 in the US, and they're providing fuel. So when they had a cyber attack and their fuel services were disrupted, it impacted many people. So from this, if we have like a forward-thinking mindset and able to share our BCPs or like sections of our BCPs, we could know how to plan if this aspect of our operation had went down. So we could kind of like plan ahead, find alternatives, make a critical timeline to like how long we need to be before we start to use the alternatives, and also knowing who to reach out to and how to come and communicate with these people. So from looking at BCP sharing, I found some common challenges that might be faced with like sharing a BCP with other people. Important one is like lack of trust. Within these industries, there are going to be competitors, and you might not be willing to share as much with the competitors because they might be able to like exploit your information. So that might hinder sharing of information. Also, a reputational risk. You might have like some soft points in your plan, and you wouldn't want to share that and like expose yourself to some type of failure or a bad reputation. No safe platform. So although there's like the ISACs, not everyone is a part of the ISACs, and not everyone can like facilitate joining that. So that if you don't have that neutral place to have information sharing, it's hard to kind of do it by yourself because you have to figure out how to share, what to share, when to share, and how to keep it private. So that's also things that you have to like facilitate by yourself. And then small and medium enterprises, they're often excluded. These are small and medium businesses in Canada that make a majority of the businesses, but due to like lack of resources, small teams, and not a lot of funds, they're not able to join a lot of the conversations, so they're not able to be as cyber resilient as bigger companies. And that's something that we also have to look at throughout this process. And now we have the disaster recovery plan.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the last stage that we talked about initially. At first, I'll give you guys a little definition about what the disaster recovery plan is. I'll talk about standards and guidelines, both provincial and global, and then at the end, I'll try to align and find correlations between them. So, a definition. So, DRPs are the guidelines they're structured processes that are in place for organizations to plan out their disaster recovery plan. The goal of it is to minimize downtime and minimize the data loss when a breach, when an incident, when a natural disaster happens. So the overall goal is to reduce the impact. However, that impact will never be zero, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So the steps that you can see here, I'm not able to go through all of them just because I don't have enough time. But it goes all the way from identifying the elements within an organization to maintaining and updating the plan iteratively and regularly. Okay, so I'll go through one standard and one guideline. The first one is a global standard, which is the TIA 942. That's the Telecommunication Industry Association. So they introduced 4 tiers for data centers. These 4 tiers, they go from, I think, 28 hours of downtime annually to 1.5 hours, around 1.5 hours annually downtime. They give guidelines onto how we can build a data center, how redundant the elements of the data center have to be to reduce the downtime. The GOITS, which is a provincial guideline, uses the TIA 942 as well, and their relation to the overall disaster response plan is that they both these two very technically work in favor of minimizing the downtime and data loss. So my colleagues talked about information sharing between the public and private sector. I'll delve into the case studies a little bit more and find the correlations between them a bit more. But what I found from both the infrastructure and from case studies was that data sharing, especially sensitive data sharing during all of these steps, is very crucial. It may be even more crucial than having a strong technical infrastructure. So Shanza talked about the Desjardins case. I'm not going to talk about it more, but the case of the Life Labs, sorry, I'm not a very good public speaker, as you can tell. But so for the case of Life Labs, what happened was that initially they came up with a good plan to mitigate the breach that happened. However, later on, they lacked proper communication, both with the public sector and their customers. And that made the whole process of their company going back, like standing up on its feet again, more and more difficult. So from the things that we together learned, and I specifically learned from this section, was that especially coming from a technical background, it was hard for me. I always said that, oh, we need to build on the infrastructure. We need to not let those attacks happen at the first place, but those attacks will happen. What can we do to minimize the casualties and those things? So communication and internal and external legal, marketing, or even human resources factors are very key and play a big role in this process. And that's it. So my colleague will talk about the recommendations.
Hello, everyone. I am going to describe the last part of our presentation. That's the recommendation one. So as my colleagues were discussing, we have found that there are a few common barriers in every stage of the cyber resilience. To mention a few, it's like the trust issues between organizations, and then the fear of reputational harm through disclosure. And then one of the most important part is that the SMEs, like resource constraint for the small and medium enterprises. The next question that comes in mind is that why sharing matters. Sharing matters because we want to build a strong cyber resilience for Canada, for its public and private sector, to enhance performance, the quality, to have a cost effectiveness, and to foster knowledge exchange through organizational resilience. Now, here I want to mention one point, and that's we have discussed it a lot, is that for the organizations, there should be something like incentives and rewards to encourage the stakeholders and the people to come forward and actually share the incidents that happen, and to share and to help the other organizations to boost their cyber resilience mechanisms. Now, I would like to discuss the recommendation part through stages at first. So our first stage was the IRP. So the Canada's Federal Cyber Incident Response Plan sets a solid framework for clear roles, response levels, and review process. However, we have identified two key issues here. Number one, the private sector participation is voluntary. And number two, the communication guidelines are too general. So to mitigate this thing, because we want an effective plan in this stage, we would like to recommend few things. Number one is that Canada struggle with real-time coordination during cyber attacks. So what if multiple sectors are affected at the same time? So to solve this, we would like to recommend that to appoint sector expert to work with federal agencies share their expert specific knowledge to others so that they can really work effectively while cyber attackers target many sectors simultaneously. And then to create national protocol to identify these cyber attackers more efficiently and to detect their patterns or something so that they will be aware what will happen next time and how the crime may happen. One of the important aspect here that we would like to mention in front of all of you is that the small companies finds difficult to or find it hard to keep their cyber response plan updated, maybe because of the resource restraint or financial issues and other reasons. The solution that we want to express in front of you is that to use digital auto-updated playbooks, and that should be affordable and accessible to these small and medium companies so that they can keep updated their cyber response plan. Then private companies fear of reputational damage that I have already mentioned. To mitigate this thing, a federally supported red team diplomacy program can be a good option where they can share the sensitive information, but they have in their mind that, okay, I am sharing this information, but maybe I don't have to face any repercussion for that. Now I am moving forward to the second stage, that's the BCP. So here I would like to mention 3 key points. Number 1, we would like to propose regular workshop for stakeholders and organizations where they can discuss and test BCPs before. It's like testing their BCPs before and share their information and build the interpersonal relationship with one another. The second point is that the expert representatives of each stakeholders should create a BCP and share platform where they can exchange the information effectively and fight against these cyber attacks. Again, talking about small business is that small business often miss out cyber support. So here we'd like to propose to create a low-cost government program that gives them tools, templates, and help them boost their cyber resilience factors. Now I am moving forward to the last one, the DRP. So here we would like to propose to create a forum where people can meet regularly and discuss not their losses, discuss the cyber resilience so that they can overcome all the attacks or damage they have faced. Okay, so this is the last slide. So here I am going to discuss a few generic recommendations. Very quickly, cross-cutting solutions. The first one is homomorphic encryption. So here, people can exchange their information. You can access the other company's information without actually seeing the original info. So this is an excellent platform where you can share your sensitive and private information. Legislative one, we need a proper legislation from where we can actually, there should be a rule that how to make a complaint or how to let others know about your cyber resilience. I think the law 26 was an excellent piece for mandatory reporting and safe guidelines for these stakeholders, something that should be implemented. And just for 20 seconds, if I can have, is like, it's not possible to create cyber resilience alone. All the private and public sectors should come forward and work together. Thank you.
name is Sibel, and we are the Disruption of Cybercrime and Online Fraud Group. And our topic is Understanding and Disrupting AI-Facilitated Phishing Attacks. This is the outline of our presentation. We are going to approach this problem from 3 different perspectives, and I will start with the technological one. Phishing is a type of cybercrime in which the attackers trick individuals into revealing sensitive information by posing as a trusted entity. There are many types of phishing. These are some of the most common ones. We can categorize them based on the target and medium. As for the target-based attacks, we have bulk phishing, in which the attackers send phishing messages to a large number of individuals. And then we have spear phishing, which is more personalized. Here the attackers target specific individuals. And then we have veiling, and here the attackers target high-level executives. And as for the mediums, we have emails, we have text messages, we have voice, and we also have more than that, including video.
So thanks, Sybil, for introducing the phishing methods. So now we know the different types of phishing methods. Let's see how we can use AI to facilitate those attacks. So in this presentation, we're going to cover 3 main AI tools that can be used for facilitating phishing attacks. The first of them is large language models. The second is voice cloning, and the third one is deepfake. So I'm pretty sure that all of you have used language models like GPT, Claude, or Gemini for your everyday tasks, or maybe, I don't know, research for anything. And so it's predictable that it can be used to facilitate phishing attacks. So in simple terms, a criminal wants to generate several different phishing messages, and instead of writing it by themselves, they can use LLMs to do that. And so they can have fluent and coherent messaging via LLMs. And it can be automated in a software pipeline to generate as many phishing messages as you want. And another thing is scalability and scalable personalization. When you want to perform phishing, you may have 1,000 victims. And you may retrieve some data from each of them, personal data from their LinkedIn, from their online info. And so you can push all of them as a prompt into an LLM and ask the LLM to generate personalized phishing messages. And you can actually change it to different contexts based on for example, one time you want to send some phishing messages to a specific type of company's employees. One time you want to send it to a governmental place. So you can simply just change the context by asking the LLM and telling it to do that for you. And one another thing is that you can simply translate your phishing messages. So you can one time write it in English, Arabic, or any language that you want, and you can ask LLMs to translate it to more than 50 different languages based on target country, target clients that you want to perform the attack. So, and the next thing is deepfake voice and video generation. So for sure, we know that these images are not the original Mona Lisa painting. And so we only need one image to push it into a generative model to generate arbitrary images and videos. And then it can be used to perform phishing. So for example, we can generate a fake video from the CEO of a company, show it to our employees, and telling them that, yeah, do this. Or maybe making a call to someone with deepfake voice. And there are many different open source tools. These screenshots are from the GitHub website that any developer, including criminals, can fetch it, use it, and generate arbitrary deepfake voice and videos that they want. And the thing that I would like to insist on in this presentation is the scalability that LLMs and generative models gives the criminals also to generate arbitrary mails, messages, and different kinds of phishing attacks that they should have done that by hand themselves before that, but now it can be automated even in the software tool.
And now I will talk about some real-world examples of AI-driven phishing attacks so that we understand how phishing changed with the evolution, with the revolution of AI. Here we have a phishing email which was sent to the employees of a cyber security company in United States. It is quite convincing, and we also see some screenshots of deepfake videos of politicians. These videos were used for cryptocurrency fraud, but we can say that the AI-driven phishing attacks target both individuals and also organizations. There were some attacks, one in Hong Kong and one in United Arab Emirates. In these attacks, two companies lost approximately $50 million. And here we have another example which happens here in Canada. In this attack, the attackers use Instagram ads to promote the deepfake videos of Bank of Montreal's chief investment strategist, Brian Balsky. In these videos, Balsky invites Canadians into joining private WhatsApp investment groups. Here, the attackers talk to their targets, their victims, to steal credentials and personal data. And these videos are, they can be generated within minutes, and you don't even need a technical background. And they are quite convincing. They are really realistic. And this is why AI-driven phishing is much more dangerous and more likely to be successful compared to the traditional phishing attacks.
So we reviewed how attackers can use AI tools to perform phishing attacks, and now let's see it from the defense side, how we can use AI to detect cybercrime, phishing attacks. So basically, the thing that we should do is that given a phishing message, voice, video, or anything, we should analyze its content to see whether it's phishing or not. So there are three main methods that we'll actually go through: ML-based filters, LLM-powered classifiers, and deepfake identifiers. So ML input filters, all the things like the email spam filters, which train a machine learning model using a data set of, for example, phishing attacks. There are many available data sets contains of phishing emails that we can train a model classifier to classify phishing versus non-phishing emails, voice, or anything on it. And so this is a more classical thing to use ML models, but the more advanced tool is using LLM-powered models. And we have two options to do so. The first is to use the available online LLMs like GPT, Claude, or Gemini. We can make API requests to them and asking them whether the given image, video, or text, email, anything is phishing or not. And several research papers showed that they can work well on these type of tasks. And the second option is to fine-tune an LLM specifically for phishing. So, for example, we have a data set of phishing, and we have an LLM, open source LLM like Llama, DeepSeek, or anything. We fine-tune that on that data, and then we will have an LLM specialized for phishing detection. And also keep that in mind that attackers can have that LLM to basically generate those phishing. So we have two sides. And so the next method is for basically mostly on image and video, deepfake image and video detection, which is watermarking. And watermark is an invisible sign in an image or video that, for example, in these two images, these two looks identical, but one of them has a watermark inside of it. What is the watermark? Each image consisted of some pixels. And maybe the generator of that image can put some patterns in some of the pixels in the RGB colors, which is invisible. But if you know the watermarking algorithm, you can identify whether in a given image there is a watermark or not. So, and how we can use it to identify deepfake things or AI-generated stuff, consider that GPT has its own watermarking algorithm. And when you ask GPT to generate an image, it adds its own watermark. And so if you have that watermark algorithm detection, so we can run that on that image and see whether we can find the GPT, Claude, or any model watermark on it or not. And it can be used to identify deepfake videos if they use watermark. And it can be done on voice and also text too. But you can refer to our report for further information.
Now we can look at this from the human behavior perspective. So this is just looking at how attackers exploit the human mind to make their phishing attacks successful. So what is super important is trust and believability, because if an attacker cannot get the victim to trust or believe what the attacker is saying, then it's unlikely that the victim will give them any information or whatever they want. So some ways that they do this is that they'll pretend to be someone or a company that the victim knows. And this will play on the fact that humans have some bias. So they might be biased towards the person or the company that the person is pretending to be. So they might not look more in depth into the message that was given to them. There's also reward proximity and vividness. So this is looking at how the attacker might give the victim a reward that is really tangible and really quick to access, so it might entice them more. And then there's also the idea of attackers playing on humans' emotions. So, for example, fear. They might create a sense of urgency, and it might disrupt the victim from making a rational decision. So these are just some message characteristics in a traditional phishing email. So there'll be a real logo. This is a PayPal logo. They'll also use words like trust, honest, and assure. This is just to make the victim feel more comfortable and try to get them to believe them and and trust them. There's also an official email address. It looks like an official email address. It says services@paypalaccount.com. That's something that seems like PayPal would send out with like an email that PayPal would have. There's also the message format itself and the greeting. It looks like something PayPal would have. So now that there's AI and it can make text, images, videos more realistic, it makes it more believable. And because of that, it's harder for the victim to distinguish if they're being phished or not phished. So it's just another layer of difficulty for the victim.
So now I'm going to talk about some of the detection challenges and security implications that we've already discussed, but I'm going to discuss some statistics here. So even before the use of AI became widespread in the general public, there was a 2015 eye tracking study that basically primed participants into detecting online fraud indicators, like what you see in this website. But what they found is that although they have a small sample size, like only 53% were able to correctly identify this phishing indicators. So this was pre-AI, 2015. Fast forward to today, 2024, the problem has only gotten worse. There's also another recent study, a much larger study, that participants were shown AI-generated and human-written content. And in that cohort, only 57% were correctly able to identify which one is which. What's even worse is that even domain experts are not immune to these technological advances. So for example, in another study, academic linguists and top journal reviewers, they were presented with AI-generated research abstracts. They were able to identify that it was AI only less than 40% of the time. So why am I telling you all of these statistics? They have one thing in common. It's that the participants' confidence in their judgments don't directly correlate with the accuracy of their decision. So everyone can be duped. And some of them my colleagues have already touched upon this. What are the implications for security? It is getting harder and harder to spot AI-generated content because of the believability. So the traditional red flags that we've come to use are quickly disappearing. For example, poor grammar, spelling mistakes, awkward phrasing. These are not as commonplace anymore. So instead, there's hyper-personalization at scale. So as Alireza said, you can now automate this stuff. You can deploy them at a massive scale. So I'm not going to bore you with more of the statistics, but so what are our current defense strategies and how are they holding up? Not that well. even with, we're basically playing cat and mouse with these technologies. Two of the most widely used email platforms, Gmail and Outlook, have been shown to allow over half of AI phishing emails to go through and reach user inboxes. Another vector of attack, browser-based phishing, with these website spoofing, has surged 140% year on year, according to a 2024 industry report. On the user side, things are not great either. This is actually a Canadian government survey that showed the vast majority of Canadians can identify phishing indicators. So that's over 80% of Canadians can spot phishing indicators. But in a global survey of like a much bigger cohort, they found that even with this awareness, the gap between awareness and behavior is wide, because even with being able to identify phishing indicators, people still click on links and read messages that seem fishy. So in general, users prefer simpler, less intrusive security measures. So
We can also understand AI-facilitated phishing by looking at the cyber offenders and their networks. So what makes this a little more different now with the scalability of AI is the fact that instead of lone hackers committing the cyber attacks, now we have bigger cyber ecosystems and various key players that play different roles and responsibilities to commit the cyber attack. So who's involved in this cyber ecosystem? We have various key players, such as developers who are responsible for making the AI phishing tools. We have deployers who are launching the attacks, and we have facilitators who specialize in specific services like denial of service, malware, or ransomware. And we have the money mules. Money mules they can be ordinary individuals who are often vulnerable job seekers, or somebody who is looking for a lucrative way to make money. They may be engaging in the money mule participation as intentional or unintentional. These are some of the key players, although there may be other roles that are important in the cybercrime ecosystem. So what's dangerous about these networks is that they grow very fast, and they grow both offline and online. Traditional social networks for criminals often depended on social ties and pre-existing relationships. However, with the introduction of social media and also online forums and dark webs, it's become much easier to facilitate the criminal ecosystem activities and also just to recruit in general. So for example, some of the popular platforms that have been used to recruit and communicate malicious activities has been Telegram, Snapchat, Wickr, Signal, also the dark web, and also many job forums such as LinkedIn and Indeed. One effective way that stakeholders can disrupt these networks to stop the illicit activity happening is first disrupting the trust and the knowledge transfer process. So what we can do here, and especially in a law enforcement capacity, is first covertly infiltrate these forums or any platforms that malicious activity may be taking online. For example, a law enforcement official can take on a covert identity and perhaps suggest that a mole is in a forum, or that their activities has been compromised and that they are being surveilled. This, without even proof, can still create a sense of confusion and fear among these malicious actors, which is exactly what we would need to start delaying the process of coordination and effective collaboration. Another way that they could overtly stop or delay the cybercriminal network is to work with companies like Google, X, Reddit, and other forums to buy ad space in search engines, and to have it so like when they search up resources for phishing, for example, or any other illegal activity, it pops up with a warning saying that, hey, did you know that this is illegal? This has X amount of imprisonment time or fine, to potentially deter potential actors from accessing these resources. The third is to damage reputation of known actors in these cybercriminal ecosystems. An important part of establishing reputation is having known identity within these forums. For example, previous activity or personal relationships with other malicious actors that are known in the ecosystem. So law enforcement can further damage this reputation by basically spreading false information about a known actor to create more distrust within the internal networks and create paranoia. Another way of effectively disrupting such networks is to target the recruitment process and where the money is coming in from. So we have to look at money mules and how money mules are recruited. Many of the times, money mules, like I've mentioned before, are recruited via personal ties, but they're also being found on job websites such as Indeed or LinkedIn. Therefore, companies like LinkedIn or any website that has an ad space should take a more proactive approach to identifying illegitimate or fraudulent job advertisements that are posted online. This can be done through leveraging data scraping capabilities of artificial intelligence, perhaps by collecting all the information that is open source on the business's external reviews, affiliation with any other organization, registration with the government businesses, or using the company domain to verify an employer business. Therefore, they can use all these kind of background information to see if they can label the job posting with one of these three labels to help the applicant understand the cautions of sharing their personal information online to a potentially fraudulent employer.
Now we can look at how to disrupt this on the victim level. So one of the main things that we need to do is awareness raising. This is super important to make sure that everyone is aware about phishing and how to deal with phishing, just because everyone is at risk. So this can be done through online resources. It can also be done through training, immediate on-the-job training, so everyone is primed from the beginning to think about phishing. There can also be a test element to it to make sure that people are paying attention to the training. And there could be an idea of a phishing score or a phishing level with this. So every time you complete a training, you move closer to a different tier. So beginner, intermediate, so on. This could also be displayed to employers so they can see if a potential employee can spot phishing and has paid attention to training. It can also try to create incentive inside individuals to pay attention to training as well, because it might affect their employment. There can also be marketing campaigns as well. So the idea of the federal government doing marketing, and then also internal marketing inside of organizations, just to make sure that everyone's aware and always thinking about phishing. Then there's an organizational forum that could be developed. So this could be where an employee might get a message and they're not sure if it's phishing or not, so they can post it on a forum. They can ask their other coworkers to see if something is phishing or not, and their coworkers could support them, let them know if it is, if it isn't, and if needed, they can have an IT person confirm or deny if there's no consensus between everyone. Then there's the idea of an established code word. So this could be a word that is only known for people inside the company or in a team. So if someone's trying to get sensitive information from them, they could ask for a code word. If they don't know the code word, then it's obvious that they might be an attacker. This is also effective in companies where there's separation of duties, because only people in if someone in a different team is asking you for information that you know that they shouldn't have, then it's likely that they're an attacker. And then finally, UX features. This is also really important for text messages, because normally when there are text messages, when it'll just say report to junk, sender is not in your contact list, if something seems like it could be malicious. So it would be helpful to highlight it in a color so that the user is aware of this, and also be helpful to have an area code from where the text message is supposedly coming from. So if someone is in Ottawa, they could question, why am I getting a text message or a phone call from someone in California? It would also be helpful if links in these messages and in emails weren't immediately clickable and you had to copy and paste. That way it would make the victim think a little bit more before clicking on the link. And then it would also be helpful if emails weren't immediately deleted, and instead they were moved to a junk folder, and the user was told why something was flagged as phishing, so the user is more aware for the future if they get other messages like that.
Currently, Canada has a couple legislations that could be applied to phishing. First, we have fraud, and then we also have identity fraud and unauthorized use of a computer. All three legislations are indictable offenses in the Canadian legislation, but they don't directly help with AI-facilitated phishing.
So according to our report, we have identified two limitations of the current Canadian Criminal Code. The first is that it is unable to effectively distinguish between traditional fraud and AI-facilitated fraud. And the second is that it lacks a separate characterization and criminal regulation of AI use behavior. For instance, the AI-facilitated criminal tool has not been included in the current criminal code, and also the current criminal code hasn't established crimes such as maliciously AI-generated content and using AI for mislead behavior. So what are the solutions of like this kind of limitations? Here, we propose to promote the AI legislation. And this is also reflecting into the Canadian legislation. So in 2022, the Canadian government just proposed the AI and Data Act, and it introduced the criminal offenses that directly targets the harmful use of AI, such as intentional fraud via AI, which means deploying an AI system with the intent to defraud the public and cause substantial financial loss, where such loss in fact occurs. However, following the federal election this year, the new government has not reintroduced this act. So if the Canadian approach doesn't work, what could we learn from like other countries' legislation? Here I choose to adopt the EU AI Act because it is the world's first AI regulation that systematically and comprehensively regulate AI. Here we identify the 3 points that could be useful for the AI legislation. The first is establishing systematically and foresighted legal structure. So the EU AI Act just introduces the risk-based approach based on the purpose. So the AI facilitated fraud, like AI phishing, could be identified as high-risk AI, and it could trigger higher regulatory standards. And the second is to make platform take responsibility and transparency obligations. So the Article 50 of the EU AI Act states that disseminating deepfake generated content on the platform the platform should disclose such content, and it also has an obligation to identification and risk assessment. And lastly is about traceability and technical responsibility. So if the AI is considered as high-risk AI system, it should establish a complicated traceability mechanism. So, however, it is also widely acknowledged that the current the law tends to be lag behind technological developments. So to resolve this issue, we introduced the soft law responses for AI phishing. So soft law means a form of regulation that does not have legal bindings. So here we propose 5 recommendations for AI phishing. The first is release of AI phishing risk identification and response guidelines. The second is promoting industrial self-regulatory mechanisms and voluntary guidelines. The third is to establish AI content labeling system. And third, promoting the institutionalization of AI use policy with enterprises. And finally, build a public-private partnership platform and AI fraud warning system.
In conclusion, AI-facilitated phishing is an emerging threat. Understanding this cybercrime from a technological, human behavioral, and legal perspective is crucial since it requires an interdisciplinary approach to better understand it. Cybercriminals will always find a way to exploit new technologies, so we as a society must take an active, proactive approach to understand and stay informed. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.
and gentlemen, my name is Destiny, and just for clarity, our team is presenting on the topic, international collaboration and leadership. So we are going to be asking a lot of questions. Why does Canada need to show leadership on the global stage? Times have changed. The United States is no longer interested in playing the big brother role. The world has changed. So this is time for Canada to step in. I know some people will be asking, what can Canada do? Canada is just a country of about 41.5 million people. How can it lead on the global stage? But Canada has got resources, abundance of natural resources. Canada has got high, smart, and intelligent workforce. Canada has got the climate. Canada is strategically positioned to take that leadership role. Now, this is what my team and I have developed. We have categorized this into 4 stages, starting with workforce, what Canada has, how Canada can utilize its workforce, the natural resources available, how Canada can use it to its advantage, and then the freedom, the media freedom, and less censorship that we enjoy in Canada. We know that in Canada, privacy rights are very strict. There is so much freedom guaranteed by the Charter of Rights and Freedom that all of us enjoy. We know that Canada is a ripe place, and Canada has that opportunity and the privilege to assume their position. So I'm going to start with the first person, one of my colleagues, Oliver, to lead us on this discussion.
Great, thank you, Destiny. So, okay, let's get to my section there. All right, so the next colleagues that are going to be presenting today, they're going to be talking a little bit more about how Canada's connection to the world can be one of our largest advantage. But I suggest that we start at home first. We start looking a little bit more domestically in terms of the fact that what we have here in Canada is an incredibly skilled workforce, an incredibly well-educated workforce as well. And this is perhaps one of our most overlooked advantages when it comes to Canada being a leader on the global stage. So to start, let's put what the global situation of the current cybersecurity workforce into perspective. So right now, there is a global shortage of what is needed within cybersecurity in terms of professionals. And some of the literature suggested that in 2021, this exceeded over 3 million positions, either directly or indirectly related, that there is a shortage of. And within the same time scope, since 2015, the Canadian demand for cybersecurity professionals has actually outpaced the broader labor market. And this is particularly concerning because there's actually been a decrease in Canadian businesses that have had in-house cybersecurity staff, decreasing from 61% in 2021 down to just about 50% in 2023. And this is due to 2 main reasons. One is due to the fact that there's a lot of outsourcing that is happening. So there's not that institutional knowledge within every individual organization. And secondly, there's just the reason that more and more businesses are not thinking that it is a priority for them in spending. And this is a particularly large issue because recovery costs due to cyber attacks is actually rising faster than investments in prevention and detection within businesses. However, Canada may have a solution. Canada is one of the leaders in the G7 whenever it comes to education. Just about 2/3 of our adult population holds a post-secondary degree. And because of this, and because of our diversity in our workforce and education models, there's a potential for Canada to use this to our advantage. However, as you'll see in the next couple of slides, this isn't necessarily the case as it stands. So let's take a look at the characterization of the cybersecurity workforce domestically here in Canada. So the skills that are necessary are rapidly changing. There's a rising demand for cloud-based skills and also for coding skills in very high-level types of coding languages such as Go and Ruby, and also more platform-specific skills, such as now related to Azure and then also to Google Cloud. Now, it's not just these sorts of technical skill sets that are becoming more and more of a necessity within Canada's cybersecurity industry, but also core security skills like information security, network security are still incredibly essential, yet are not always found in computer science curriculums in the nation. Similarly, there's other soft skills that are starting to emerge in the cybersecurity ecosystem, especially leadership for cybersecurity managerial positions. And there's an increasing requirement over the past number of years for more and more years of experience required to access the exact same job positions. On the education side of things, most roles within cybersecurity require formal degrees or cybersecurity certifications. And this is very important. However, the issue is that there's a decreasing number of entry-level jobs that require a year or less than experience. They're almost non-existent at this point. And overall, there's a much broader emphasis put on for these types of formal qualifications instead of alternative pathways to gaining these same skill sets. And we can see here, it's these 2 points in particular suggest that the current hiring ecosystem within Canada is not necessarily geared in the best way to making sure that we're able to recruit talent into our businesses, because it's not really meeting people where they're at. Another interesting point that I wanted to just quickly mention whenever it comes to cybersecurity in Canada or cybersecurity more globally is that it has a unique aspect of stress attached to it. Within the literature, some of the language that has been used to describe the levels of stress and the different stressors that are involved is really quite inflammatory. And this is mainly due to the fact that cybersecurity professionals, not only do they have to deal with constantly evolving technical threats, but they also have to deal with organizational difficulties as well, such as changing policies, as well as tools and processes that are changing or may not be adequately suited to help them respond to the issues that they have to face. And this can lead to lots of burnout. But there is actually, according to some of the literature I read, there is actually the possibility that if this stress is managed well, it could actually be an asset for cybersecurity, because if resources such as support, workplace culture, and the autonomy that these cybersecurity professionals are given, it could actually give them much more reward within their position. But again, this has to be well balanced. Now, let's look at the overarching issue. Talent is simply not flowing into the cybersecurity workforce, both in terms of the skill set that is needed and also in the quantity. And I boiled this down into 3 main reasons. First, like I mentioned, there's a lack of entry-level pathways for individuals that have minimal real-world or practical experience. Secondly, there seems to be quite a bit of a job and skill mismatch whenever it comes between what hiring and HR is or organizations are asking for in terms of specific skill sets and what's educated potential cybersecurity professionals are walking out of their educational educational curriculums with. And finally, there's increasingly vague or unclear role definitions within actual job postings. Yes, it really comes down to sometimes to the level of the job posting that the skills that are outlined within them are unclear. And this could create some ambiguity and some difficulty making sure that cybersecurity professionals are getting matched up to the correct positions. So one way that we could approach this in making sure that there is consistency across the sector is the idea of professionalization and standardization. Now, there has been quite a bit of debate in the literature that I found between the scope of how far professionalization should go within the cybersecurity industry. Should it be professionalized kind of as a whole industry or within particular subsectors of it? And that was something that was really interesting to explore. But I'd like to start off by just looking at the fact that defining the profession is something that is very important, not only for advocacy, but for also making sure that there are clear professional pathways that one can take to actually get to a certain profession, and that there's a clear understanding of the education, training, and certification that is required to get into whatever position one wants to. However, within the literature, it is arguably said that there is the way in which our credentials and our education is currently modeled is quite scattered. However, in Canada, we have been quite proactive and moving in towards a direction where we are starting to define we are starting to put definitions on what the cybersecurity profession actually looks like. Based off of the NICE framework, or the NICE framework that originated in the United States, Canada has developed the cybersecurity skills framework, which provides this list of different definitions that is used to define the skill sets, the types of tasks, and the roles that exist within the cybersecurity industry. And this has been modeled off the NICE framework, but it has added in a Canadian spin, if you will, taking into consideration bilingualism, how much of our economy is made up of SMEs, and also the fact that a large portion of cybersecurity in Canada is based off of the idea of one person being somewhat of a generalist, so having to cover a lot more ground potentially than the United States. But these frameworks aren't useful at all unless there's actually some way to put them into action. And that's why I also suggest that we need to have curriculum reform of our cybersecurity curriculums here in Canada. So first, of course, we need to make sure that there is more hands-on training available to cybersecurity professionals in training. And secondly, we need to make sure that the core competencies that they're developing are more aligned with what industry actually requires. So of course, there is a basis of theory that is required, but we need to make sure that our academics and the folks that are developing our academic platforms are communicating more with industry to actually understand what's required. And I'd be remiss to talk about our developing workforce if we don't mention how important ensuring diversity within this workforce is. Diversity within workforces is important not only because it is an essential part of the Canadian identity, but also because it is operationally better for cybersecurity. More diverse teams are able to both identify and confront challenges in a more efficient and widespread manner. However, within cybersecurity, the workforce is frankly not as diverse as it should be. Women represent only about 20% of the current cybersecurity workforce in Canada. And other equity-seeking groups are facing similar barriers to employment and recognition of their credentials and experience. And there are some great ideas and great models that are being developed here in Canada to help confront and respond to this issue. For example, different programs like HackerGals, CyberDams, and also, interestingly, Brandon University's partnership with local First Nation communities to help develop cyber hygiene courses for communities that are starting to receive high-speed internet. So all of these different types of programs are really useful, but they are still pretty fragmented and need to be scaled up. Additionally, within the actual industry, within businesses and within government, informal peer networks have been suggested to play an important role in making sure that equity-seeking groups are able to find connections and also become aware of leadership opportunities. So overall, my three main recommendations. First, we need to make sure that we update our curriculum with a modern adaptive education, and that this curriculum and this education continues not just in university, but throughout one's time in the professional cybersecurity environment. Secondly, there has to be real entry-level pathways to actually get into cybersecurity that are clear and defined. Third, we have to make sure that rural and underrepresented groups are also able to find their way into cybersecurity. And perhaps an overarching recommendation that includes all of these is that we need to develop, or Canada should develop, a national workforce strategy focused on cybersecurity so that we have clear definitions for what is needed in the industry, as well as what credentials lead to certain positions and how we can ensure that there is diversity in the workforce. And now I'll hand it over to my colleague Nazmul to explain how Canada's data infrastructure can be an asset.
Thank you, Oliver. Good afternoon, everyone. So Canada does not only have advantage in its people, but there's also a lot of natural capabilities that Canada can leverage. So we know that with the recent AI, there's a AI boom that's going on, and there's an AI revolution, and this is because of the high computational capabilities that we have right now. And with high computations come high energy requirements. So from a report by International Energy Agency, we can see that by 2030, the U.S. The AI computations in the U.S. will surpass the energy demands of all manufacturing sectors in the U.S. And from the same report, we can see that there has been a 300% spike in energy consumptions by the data centers from 2015 to 2024. Now, on a different angle, this AI revolution poses a significant opportunity that Canada can leverage and play a leadership role. So first, obviously, the energy. We need lots of energy to train AI models, advanced AI models. And there's a push for sustainability as well. Many corporations are moving to sustainable or carbon neutral energy sources for their AI. And obviously the security, where you have to safeguard the AI models and the data related to it. Now, how can Canada leverage all these opportunities? Like, what does it have already? So Canada has a natural advantage for the AI revolution. And one of them is clean energy. Canada has one of the lowest carbon emissions, and 80% of its total electricity comes from clean sources. Another advantage is climate. So the northern region has a cold climate, which can act as a passive cooling for the data centers and the GPU clusters, and it is also stable in terms of its climate as well as global conflict. As we can see, it's a bit isolated to the north. So these are the advantages that Canada has, and it can leverage to become the global leadership in the AI ecosystem. Now, there are a few challenges, and one of them is resource utilization. So among the G7, Canada lags significantly in terms of available public computing infrastructures. And to have advanced AI computing infrastructures, you need upfront investment as well as long-term vision. And obviously the challenges in developing and retaining cyber talents, like Oliver mentioned. And there also comes the regulatory challenges. There is no unified strategy or collaboration considering the key domains such as energy, economic development, as well as tech. And obviously there's also the federal and provincial jurisdiction complexities, which can limit expanding AI strategies further. So these are a few challenges that Canada already has, but what can Canada actually do? So Canada can establish itself as a global clean AI infrastructure hub, where you can create various AI energy zones, where you can give where you can have access to energy as well as optimal climate conditions. There can also be unified task force considering the key departments, federal as well as provincial. And then another important aspect of AI is its privacy, obviously. So Canada can enforce strong privacy and security measures to protect the data involved with AI, and as well as facilitate AI infrastructure as critical infrastructure to have more strict physical and cyber security standards. So now I'll pass it on to Amara to talk about the energy interdependencies of Canada.
So Nazma talked a lot about future energy infrastructure, but I'm going to talk about Canada's current energy infrastructure, mainly the electrical grid. So the US and Canada have the longest border in the world, and across that border are 37 transmission lines that carry energy back and forth. This has a lot of benefits for both countries, including clean energy advantages. So Nazma as well mentioned how Canada generates a lot of clean energy. That's 80% of all of Canada's energy generation comes from clean sources, compared to just over a third for the US. This means that states like New York and Massachusetts use a lot of Canadian energy to help meet their clean energy goals. The second is demand balancing. So the demand for energy in both countries peaks at different times of the year. So it's winter time in Canada for the heating, and then summertime in the US for air conditioning. Thirdly is economic gains. So Canada received $4.3 billion worth, $4.3 billion from the US for energy, or electricity rather, and received $1.6 billion in 2023 alone. However, the interoperability of the energy grid in terms of the infrastructure itself and the physical nature of it means that it's open to a lot of dangers. So as Destiny said in his introduction, there is a changing geopolitical climate, and that means that new vulnerabilities are arising. The first vulnerability is economic protectionism. So as we know, in January, the US administration introduced tariffs, what looked like would be 10% tariffs on Canadian energy. And in response, I think it was Ontario that introduced a 25% retaliatory tariff or tax increase on goods from the US. While those haven't actually happened, and I think US energy is exempt from tariffs under the Canada, US, and Mexico trade agreement, it has introduced a point of fragility. Another point of fragility is outages and cyber attacks. So the interoperability of the grid and the vulnerabilities that could arise as a result of that were very apparent on the 14th of August 2003, which is when there was an outage at a power plant in Ohio, and that left 50 million Canadians and Americans without power from hours up till days. And while there was a lot of coordination and engagement after that between the two countries to ensure nothing similar would happen again, there are growing threats of cyber attacks, and the Canadian Threat Bulletin has asserted that although Canadian infrastructure is a lot less likely to be directly targeted by certain threat actors abroad, any attack on US infrastructure is going to likely cascade into Canada. So how can we mitigate this? There are quite a few options that are available. The first one would be cyber defense. So that is more of an international collaboration, collaborating with the US, setting up joint test beds to help simulate spillover attacks, for example. Another way to ensure cyber defense could be third-party audits of foreign-made infrastructure within the Canadian energy grid. The second one would be energy sovereignty. So that's prioritizing domestic infrastructure over these interconnected links. And the third would be community leadership. So a really good model for this that I found was the Wate Power Project, which is 51% Indigenous owned, and it's also it was a $2 billion project, and it connected around 15 million people, I think, in rural areas, which seeks to also end diesel dependency in those areas, which again links to the clean energy. So overall, Canada has a real natural advantage, maybe not natural, maybe it's received an advantage overall on the global stage with regards to its energy and its electricity grid. And it's really something that could be leveraged on in the future. It's a vulnerability, but it's also a strength, and it should be viewed like that. And I've talked a lot about energy sharing, and now my colleague Sunwook is going to talk about information sharing as an advantage.
Thank you, Amara. So now I'm going to cover about trust and transparency for international information sharing. So especially our focus on why this trust and transparency matters in international cooperation, and what Canada already has for it and what we recommend for it. So the cyberspace is an information-driven ecosystem, and it needs a trust system based on transparency. Three things can be achieved from this. So the first one, it can make faster cross-border action. Partners can take a swift response by when the data is verified openly. And second, it can reduce uncertainty and transaction costs. Mutual trust can save both money and time by reducing redundant audits and complex process. And the third is it can make long-term partnerships and enhance resilience. So let's talk about the strengths Canada has. I will talk about the strength and the global indicators that can demonstrate those strengths. And the first one is media freedom and low censorship. So with these, partners can share their data openly. And so the indicator, the first one, RSF, it evaluates the WordPress freedom in 2025. And Canada ranks 21st, placing it in the satisfactory tier, while the US ranks on 57th in the problematic tier. And the next is freedom on the net score. It evaluates the global internet freedom. And in 2024, Canada ranks third with 86 points, while the US falls into 13th with 76 points. As you can see, Canada is trusted as a globally filter-free primary source. Next, Canada has high trust in cybersecurity systems. So with this, partners can share their data with the belief that their data is not modified and it is accurate. So the first indicator, MIT Cyber Defense Index, evaluates the cyber resilience of the world's 20 most digitally advanced economies. And Canada has fifth on the rank, which is the leaders group on the world. And the second, NCSI, which stands for the National Cybersecurity Index. It evaluates the legal, technical, and cooperative readiness in national cybersecurity system. And Canada took seventh on this rank, which is the first among the G7 countries. And as you can see this figure, Canada has achieved 100% fulfillment in 10 out of the 12 categories. So the recommendation, Canada already has two pieces. One is CCCS, which stands for Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. It handles federal incident response and operates the national CERT. And the other one is CCTX, which is Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange. And it is an independent, not-for-profit organization for sharing cyber threat intelligence. And it collects, analyze, and share CTI across public and private sectors. So what we recommend is merging these two into a single global CTI hub. So it can collect alerts from global governments and industry, both domestic and international. And also it can send real-time feeds to global partners. So by doing so, Canada can take a leadership in the information sharing internationally. Now I'm going to toss it to my fellow researcher, Natalie. She is going to talk about the network.
Everyone, my name is Natalie. I'm going to talk about developing a Canadian intercontinental network infrastructure. So overall, the main opportunity that Canada has is to connect countries within Asia to countries within Europe through a network infrastructure directly connecting through the internet. And this helps create interface between these two continents, as well as expand the market for digital products and services, as well build trust and through both diversity and the ethnocultural diversity within Canada, as well as the economic and political stability, as well as geographical isolation to secure network infrastructure. So within Canada, most of the high internet speeds exist within the most populous cities within Canada, which are kind of located south of Canada near the US border. And this has incentivized investments into network infrastructure that connects Canada and the US, rather than focusing on connecting Canada from the East and West Coast. And furthermore, the network infrastructure within Canada is defined by satellites that are located in the northern regions, which limits internet connectivity because they provide less speed and less ability to transfer data, because the data has to transfer up and down in the satellite compared to using a fiber optic cable. So some previous projects I have looked at developing an intercontinental network is first the submarine cables that exist between Canada, both on this west coast. So there's one that connects Canada to Japan through a cable line called the Topaz line, which was invested in by Google, was to increase digital products and services within the Asia Pacific region. There's also a few that connect from Canada's east coast to Europe and Greenland to increase economic activity within the Atlantic Europe area. And currently there is a project that's being proposed to actually build a network connection between Europe and Asia called the Far North Fiber Inc. project, which is a joint cooperation between Finland, Japan, and the US. And Canada was listed as an affiliate to the US company and had to provide external approval in order to assess the environmental impacts as well as impacts on the shipping routes. So to build an intercontinental network, made a few recommendations. The first is to build a direct network through Canada that connects Asia and Europe. And this can help not only create the interface between Europe and Asia to increase digital products and services within markets, but also help incentivize and drive motivations for developing a network infrastructure within Canada. The second recommendation is to establish contingencies, and this can help improve cyber resiliency, because there's a network infrastructure that creates redundancies in how data is transferred and stored, not just within Canada, but also internationally as well. And our third recommendation is to look towards developing and implementing the next generation of communication technologies. So this could look at improving communication protocols and cable technology, which are pretty standard, but Canada does have the opportunity to look at enhancing the cables as well as communication protocols that could adapt better to the digital environment as well as demands for digital products and services. Lastly, Canada could also look at scaling up and enhancing investment into satellite technologies. And this could be useful because many regions within Canada are reliant on satellite technology. So Canada has the opportunity to invest and scale up the ability of satellite technologies to deliver internet access and speed to different regions within Canada. I'll pass off to Destiny to give off the conclusion.
So I will just summarize this. We know that it is time for Canada to look inwards. Canada cannot continue to rely on the United States. Canada has got all it takes to be a leader on the global stage. The time is now. I know we might be asking how, but if you don't start now, Canada will continue to play or to rely on this principle of all eggs in one basket strategy, where it completely relies on the United States for its businesses, for its exports and imports. This is time to look inwards and then diversify to Europe, Asia, and even Africa. This can work if we start now. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.